What is that one movie?
Ooh. Um, The Last Samurai comes to mind. I just
Oh,
absolutely I love that film. Love that film.
what is it about
So
that
much,
movie?
so much depth. Oh, there's just so much depth to it. Obviously, there's a historic romance story, USA, Japan, but it's about him learning the art and the culture of the samurai warrior,
Yep.
and him going through that process and learning the discipline and seeing the beauty in their culture and experiencing the freedom of their culture and the peacefulness. It's just incredible, incredible.
Awesome, man. I'm adding it to my watch list. I love asking all my guests this question before we get started. And listen, we are live on YouTube now. So for those of you watching live, thank you for tuning in. If you're watching after the fact, thank you for watching. I'm here with Olympian, educator, and consultant Martin Reeder. You put out a ton of content, but I'm going to save myself. I'm going to let you tell us what it is that you do and all the things that you give to the people around you.
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. Okay. So as a job title right now, I work for New South Wales Volleyball, which would be the equivalent of a province in Canada. So I'm in Sydney, Australia right now. I work there 3 days a week as the sports operations manager. So I dictate and oversee all programs of discovery, development, and performance. That's 3 days a week. On the other side of that, I have a program called Off Ball Athlete. So it's a podcast and a platform where I share education for more so athletes on the inner game on mind, body, and life. And this is really more so about the locus of control and getting young athletes and athletes, semi-pro, pros, to really own what they can control, to create systems around their mind, around their body, and their life to create the best possible outcome for themselves, both within sport and beyond it. Other than that, I train a few young athletes physically. So I used to be a Nike trainer in Canada, owned a fitness business there. I do a lot of work with the body. So I am pretty physical in that sense, training about 2 to 4 times a week with different clients, as much as I can with this whole social distancing. And then just try to lead as much as I possibly can on the side of all that with some breath work. So I've been studying breath work for about 4.5 years now. Really see that as the next step in next evolution in human performance, because we've all just glazed over it. It's been under our noses this whole time. But with this recent situation regarding stress, we all now fundamentally realize that, holy smokes, life's happening quickly. We're doing a lot of stuff. Can I actually manage it? What's my relationship with stress like? Am I fickle? Am I resilient? Do I have anxiety attacks all the time? How do I manage myself in a pressure environment? And I think
Right,
we're
right.
all realizing right now that that's pretty important.
Amazing, man. Amazing. A ton of great stuff. And I had the pleasure of talking to you a little over a year ago. And there was so much from that conversation that I still refer back to and I still value. And I
Amazing.
thought this platform would be great to share it with other creators in our Henry's community. I want to start with your 3 I's and specifically intention. Can you just I mean, listen, it's hard to put into even a 30-minute conversation, but can you explain to our audience what do you mean by the 3 I's and what does each one entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So intention, integrity, intensity. And this comes from a performance background within sport, but it applies to absolutely everything. Honestly, there's nothing that it doesn't apply to, because it really takes into account the natural rules or regulations of life. So intention, you can't focus if you don't have clarity. So what is your intention? And I find a lot of people struggle with creating a clear intention. They're not really sure what they're doing. So
Right,
getting
right.
down into a very clear purpose statement, this is my intention. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I want to do. So that kind of mission statement. What happens in culture right now is we immediately go to intensity. Now, I'm not going to refer to intensity, but we kind of skip the integrity bit. And so most people just go right to doing as much as I can and not really know any feedback systems and haven't really built up anything to sustain intensity.
Right,
So
right.
our default in current day and age is intensity. Everyone's on the grind. Okay, so I want to get people to move a step back. Prior to intensity, we need to set up our integrity. If I want you to imagine that the intention is that beam. Okay, let's just say it's a speed train. Well, the integrity is the tunnel that it passes through. It's the railway line. It's our systems in place. So we
Right.
want to have a framework, a scaffolding to allow that intention to pass through. And let's just say that's 3 or 4 things that I'm consciously building to support that intention. Then we move to intensity. And intensity, we must obey the natural rules and regulations of progression. So, when you're building your body, you have to there's a specific overload protocol that you can't lift the heaviest. If you've never lifted a weight before and you go to lift 500 pounds off the ground, no chance.
Right,
But there's
right.
natural laws of progression where you're looking to increase your strength, increase your speed, increase your ability to perform something. Well, you have to respect intensity. And so you have to go through waves. So you reflect, hey, this is what I want to do. Well, I'm going to start with this level of intensity, and I'm going to consciously increase that intensity over time and go through these micro and meso phases that performance world abides by, because you can't just go from 0 to 100. And so a lot of people go from 0 to 100, spin their tires, burn out, get lost, get super discouraged, and they didn't actually create intention, integrity, intensity to then follow that over time.
Right. I mean, I love how you kind of explain that. And what's great about this is so much of the sports ideologies and theories are applicable to even the creative space, right? Or even the
Oh yeah.
workplace for that matter. I want to go to intention. And how do you know you have the right one? Like, what is that process like to land on something that truly is something that means something to you and something of value that you should pursue?
So I think this is going to hit home with a lot of the listeners. I'm not necessarily an artist or I'll call it a content creator. I come from sport. I come from sharing a lot of things, and I've had to learn how to content create in order to share what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So hopefully that resonates in that sense. Art is hard for me, visual is hard for me, but I try to get into it. But what I will say is this, and this is Dr. Michael Gervais. He's got probably one of the best podcasts on the internet. It's called Finding Mastery, and I highly recommend everybody go in there because he dissects from a performance psychology standpoint all the best. I mean, his last podcast yesterday was with the creator of Netflix. So high-level entrepreneurs, high-level business people, high-level adventure seekers, athletes, you name it, he's there. And his primary, and I don't know if it's his philosophy, but he's the one who brings it to life. There's mastery of craft and mastery of self. And what we have recently really bought into is that we are our craft. And so when your self lives in your craft, you're doing things for your craft, well, we lose ourselves within it. Okay, so the goal in an ideal world is we're using mastery of craft to master ourselves. So when you say, is the intention right? There is no right or wrong, but if you're enslaving yourself to your craft with no thought of like, how is that progressing me, then I think we get lost. So we have to build it for ourselves to move ourselves forward, and we're using our craft, whatever that craft is, videography, photography, art design, marketing, you name it. How am I applying myself into my craft to learn about myself, versus I wake up every day and I'm a slave to my craft and there is no me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so if there is no me, you're not, it's tougher to be connected to it like that. There's a layer before intention, which I don't really talk about all that often with people that I work with. We get there, but it's intuition. So before intention, what's the intuition behind it? And you have to have a relationship with yourself to feel the situation, to then act on that intuition and then set your intention. And so if you are overloaded with stress, you're doing something to please other people, you haven't found yourself within your craft, you're using your craft as your identity, it's tough to have intuition there, because you're going to do everything from what would be more of an external side of things. You're doing something so that everyone sees that thing, not necessarily you. Now that's hard because you might be behind a video camera or a camera, or you're not necessarily the person, but there still is you in there, and you need to find yourself as much as possible and share yourself and challenge yourself through your craft. Does that help you at all?
That is phenomenal. And I wrote down the name of the book, Finding Mastery. That's probably the next thing I'm going to read right now. That was remarkable. I have to ask you, moving into intensity, it really comes down to energy management as well. And you mentioned burnout, but there's even the precursors to burnout that can have, damaging effects on people's productivity. With respect to energy management, how would you guide someone, whether they're an athlete or even a creator, how would you guide them into expending the right amount of energy, but also managing their energy load?
I love it. That's a great question. So first and foremost, most people are going to go to physical energy right away. But there's mental energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy. Now, I'm not here to be, this holistic spiritual coach. That's not where I'm going to go. But there are different facets to energy. Mm-hmm. We go towards and lean towards the energy that we see, which is mostly physical. So having said that, what I'll recommend people do is first and foremost, what are the pieces of your life that are stealing energy from you? Okay. So before we even start adding, what are the parts of your life where you're losing energy? And if you can plug a little bit here and there, that's going to help you without adding more to your plate. So what are the parts of your life that are robbing you of energy? Well, nutrition, if you're eating terribly, highly refined foods, very sugar dense foods, it's a lot of prepackaged stuff. You're not cooking for yourself. You're outsourcing because it's more convenient to buy pre-bought food or go to restaurants. Well, you're now playing at the standards of that restaurant or that packaged food. And most of the time, they're just looking to sell things and turn a profit. Right. Very few nutrition companies have your best health in mind. So now you're having, bad fats, the sugars, a lot of additives and preservatives. There's a lot of things there that all of a sudden slow you down or bog you down. So nutrition's a great way to think about things. Is like, how can you clean up your nutrition a little bit so that you can have better energy? 2 would be, how much screen time do you have? Now, if you work on a screen, you clearly can't get rid of the screen, but how do I better manage it? So there's maybe the Pomodoro technique, which is a 25 minutes on, 5 seconds off. You do a couple rounds and then you get a longer break after, I think it's 4. I kind of create my own version of that, but am I managing myself where every 25 minutes I stand up and I walk around and I do some breathing for 5 minutes? Or do I just sit and be a slug for 8 hours and then I get up and it's like, whoa, what happened? Which happens, right? And so how do we choose to create more energy in our lives? Who are the people that we're spending time with? How are they potentially draining it from us? Are we giving? Are we trying to prove ourselves to everybody all the time, not giving back to ourselves? Do I have a breath practice? Do I have a mindfulness practice? Do I work out? If it's not working out, which that isn't the first step, do I go for walks?
Right.
Right? Am I outside? When was the last time I saw sunrise? When was the last time I saw sunset? What time do I go to bed? These are all things that in an ideal world you have systems around so that you have a better understanding of yourself, how to manage your own energy, how to build energy, and how to preserve energy in your life.
And listen, folks, I can ask him 1,000 more questions. I'll use this opportunity to say, check out his podcast, Off Ball Athlete, because you talk about it at length. And there's a ton of content on YouTube as well where you share this stuff. I want to move to stress management, because as soon as you start sort of managing your energy and improving there, you're still going to have stressors around you, things that you don't have control over. But the one thing I respect about you, and you talk about this a lot, is that you can control what you can control and really building discipline around that. So give me some of your thoughts on stress management and how we as individuals, and especially those of us that are probably working from home a lot right now in front of a screen, how can we better manage our stress?
Big question, huge question. And this is where the breath work comes in. So I'll start by telling a little bit of a physiological story to create some context for this. When it comes down to breathing and comes down to stress response, that pretty much is everything. Right. We all have a thing called our carbon dioxide tolerance. So from a breathing standpoint, most of us think, oh, I'm going to breathe more so I get more oxygen. So we have this thought around, I need more oxygen, therefore I'm going to be healthier potentially. And that's a lot of people think that way. What it actually is the inverse of that. It's how well I can manage a buildup of carbon dioxide internally. And carbon dioxide is the byproduct of stress, metabolic stress, mental stress, environmental stress. When we get stressed out, and this happens before you can sense it. So this is like precursor to you even being self-aware of it. Your
Right.
body will create shifts. All of a sudden there's stress, tension, work, carbon dioxide builds up inside of our body. If you have a low ceiling of carbon dioxide tolerance, that means your stress response lives here. Okay, so that's my baseline.
Right, right, right.
We're here. The goal of breath work and conscious breath work is to elevate and raise your carbon dioxide tolerance so you have more buffering room for stress. So what I'll recommend people do, we won't do the exercise, but go do it for yourself. Take 4 breaths in and out through the nose, fairly calm. At the top of the 4th breath, start a timer, and then take the longest possible exhale through the nose.
Right,
Stop
right.
the timer when you run out of breath or when you have to breathe. 2 slightly different things. When you run out of breath, means that you're just like, oh, I got nothing left, but you
Right.
didn't really feel the pain. Or you have to breathe is like, oh, I have air left, but my body's like, I need to breathe. Stop the
Right.
timer when you have to. That is your carbon dioxide tolerance window. Let's just say that's your carbon dioxide tolerance test. That'll give you some insight into what's your relationship with stress. So if you're under 15, 20 seconds, your resting state is very anxious. So that means you don't have a lot of buffer room to manage stress in your life, mental, physical, emotional, environmental, you name it. Doesn't matter. It's the same. Whereas, for instance, I'm training an Olympian who's now going to the 2021 Tokyo Games,
Right, right,
and
right.
we've moved his carbon dioxide tolerance test to 2 minutes.
Wow.
Okay, so
Jeez.
if you think about that physiologically inside of your body, how you manage stress is critically important. And so when you hit your ceiling, your body moves into a survival state.
Right, right.
Well, performance doesn't happen in a survival mode. I kind of coined a term. Survival is the lowest form of performance. So if all you're doing is surviving every single day, well, unfortunately, you're not really performing. We're all in a place now in our lives in an ideal world where, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we've moved past, we've transcended survival,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
now
yeah.
we're on fulfillment. We're looking at sharing our values, we're sharing our product, exciting people, inspiring people, making a change, educating, all these things. Ideally, we're moving past survival. But if you as a creator are living in a survival state, you're missing some critical layers to your creativity as a creator.
Right, 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 right. That's amazing, man. I mean, and again, it's one of these things where, especially in the times that's happening now, in the midst of a global pandemic that specifically attacks one's respiratory system, being mindful of your breath work, being mindful of your lung capacity and your ability to actually exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen is something that's probably, taken a little bit more seriously than previously. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you even have an episode on your podcast, Off Ball Athlete, where you go through a full breath exercise, right?
Yeah, so I have one breathing episode up. I'm going to be having more breath work. My goal is to have a weekly breath session on the podcast.
Beautiful.
I have one loaded right now that actually goes through the carbon dioxide tolerance test, followed by another breathing exercise and another breathing exercise. But if I can give someone something right now, it's just breathe through your nose as much as possible. Because we have our nervous systems, we have our parasympathetic and our sympathetic. Sympathetic moves more towards that flee, fight response. Okay,
Yep.
so we're moving up, and the parasympathetic actually suppresses the sympathetic and moves us down into that more rest and digest, creative, connected, safe social state. If you're breathing through your mouth and you're sitting there, you're over breathing, you're
Right.
driving a sympathetic response. I mean, if you think about it, you want to be breathing equal to your environment. So breathe in and out through your nose nice and slow when you're sitting down. Now you're in control. But if you're breathing through your mouth and you're not paying attention, you're breathing and you're over breathing, you're secretly, subconsciously driving your nervous system into, a more energetic
Yeah.
state that moves you away from the place that you want to be as a creator.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And listen, I when we talked well over a year ago, Hearing this from you fundamentally changed how I breathe.
Amazing.
At rest. I just always think about breathing through your nose, and eventually it just becomes habit, and you start to see the benefit from that, right? There's a ton more I can ask about that, but I want to move on. I got to talk about, you mentioned it in a story on one of your episodes, and that's going up against the Cuban team in beach volleyball, and they have this very braggadocious, highly machismo kind of attitude, and they try to intimidate their opponents. They're kind of known for this, at least at that time, and you just match them and you go up against them, and I think at one point you took a ball to the face, you're bleeding out your nose, but you're just like, let's go, let's effing do this. So I gotta ask, that competitive edge, I personally love tapping into it with respect to the work I do, just kind of going into that game mode, that kind of fight instinct where you're just looking at that end result. How can someone more easily or more in control tap into that? I don't know if it's an easy question to answer, but I had to ask you.
I mean, it's a tough answer to peg down for people who are different, but I'll take you through my process of that.
Yeah.
And hopefully it creates context and space for people to embrace it. So when the Cubans, I mean, they're super bravado, they're incredible athletes, but they come from a, communist island. So they need that for themselves within their own hierarchy to succeed. And then they project that externally once they're playing on the world tour. So they have that within their team. That's their culture. But when they try to do that through the net, I see that as weakness. I see that bravado is them trying to intimidate me. I see that as them trying to win the mental game before the game even starts. And so I just look at that and go, challenge accepted. I love it. So I'd play with them. If anyone's seen the movie Pumping Iron with Arnold Schwarzenegger, he used to play mind games with his opponents at the actual event. So I would do that same thing where I'd play with them. I'd speak loud and extra fast English because they didn't really understand it. I grew a ponytail and was just obnoxious and just had the samurai vibe. And whenever they had that bravado through the net, the beautiful part of it, it wasn't matching their bravado and getting into a contest with them. It was about not being impacted by it. And so when they're looking at me through the net and they're screaming and they score a point and they look at me expecting me to crumble, expecting me to show signs of weakness, expecting me to start folding up, I just look at them and smile.
Wow.
And all of a sudden they've never really experienced that before. And so then they start to crumble because how they win games isn't necessarily working. And then all of a sudden, all I need is 1 point, man. I just need 1 point. And then I just big block and then I just smile. And all of a sudden their house starts to crumble. So when it comes to that bravado and being game, you're like, I understand it was all me. Like that was just a front. That was all them. I can't control what they do. I can control my response though. I can control how it impacts my mental dialogue. It can control how I hold myself physically. So my mental and my physical posture.
Right.
And I just embraced it. So, if that can be related to other things, I'm not too sure, but no matter what other people are doing, it came down to me and it came down to how I responded. And I met that with like, I love it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Bring it up.
It really resonated with me because it's meeting the things with what you can control, and you can control your reaction or non-reaction to your environment around you, and focus on your next actionable item. What can you do to mitigate the environment around you? I absolutely love that, guys.
I'll actually. Oh, can I just say one part of that and break it down? So. There's two games. There's two games that you're playing. You're playing the game. So I was playing volleyball at that point, but you can be playing another game. And then you're playing the game between you two that's outside of it, the kind of that mental game. If you get pulled into the trap of just playing the mental game, you forget to play the game. For people that say, is your main thing the main thing? Well, if the second you stop focusing on the main thing because you're trying to play this other game, you get sucked into the trap and you lose sight of that. There was a hilarious video the other day of someone saying, once you, I think it was Preston Smiles video, is like once you start looking at your haters, you lose sight. And it was a dude on a bike who was looking at a bunch of dogs chasing him, and he ran into a car on his bike. But it's so true, right?
Yeah,
you start worrying about the tiny little things nipping at your feet, and then all of a sudden you lose sight of that main thing. So hopefully that resonates and pulls it home.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. And listen, if you guys have any questions, last chance, you can ask in the chat, but we are going to jump over to Instagram and do a live Q&A where more of you can engage in the conversation. I want to talk about this one last thing. You do have a YouTube channel, so people check it out as well as his Instagram. You did a talk for a group of kids that I think are part of a volleyball organization. And the topic was, are you game? And I watched that, and it really hit home for me. And it's really what stuck out for me is, especially during these times where we're all at home and, maybe our boss is not watching all the time. There's no one hovering over our shoulder, or, the stakes are not as high. Are you game? Are you willing to still put in that level of effort to see through what you love? Are you willing to put in the work? I'm not going to talk about it. I want to ask you about it. Please elaborate on this idea and this mentality of, are you game?
So it kind of stems off of that survival is the lowest state of performance. It kind of builds on top of that story. So, when you're just coming out of survival, you're seeing through the lens of protective and safety, and you're worried and that kind of thing. You're not going to put yourself out there. But it's the person that's game. Like, I'm game. I'm hungry. Yeah. I'll do that. Like, I'm going to see the opportunities. I'm going to seek things out. I'm going to put myself out there. And, if you've been doing this thing, whatever that thing is, for 5 years, I don't deserve to be in this position. I don't want to do that. That's below me. Yeah. I don't want to create with that person. I don't want to do that. And you start chipping away and putting yourself in this little box where you're no longer game. You're just a poopy pants, right? So how can you move back into I'm game? Like, I'm up for it. I'm hungry. Let's do these things. And now you start thinking creatively. But the second you're above certain things, or that's not a part of what I do, but that's coming from a place of like, I've been in this for so long, I'm the king of the castle type of thing. So how can we continually be hungry and game, pushing ourselves, challenging other people? And when I say challenge other people, and there's a thing called, compete is actually to strive together. So this is a founding principle of this, are you game? It's not, I'm going to mess that person up and they're going down and I'm going up. No, it's like, I want them to come at me with their best to challenge me to be my best. And we're both going to make something magical. So it's more of a collaborative effort. Mm-hmm. So competing isn't actually you're going down, I'm going up. It's actually show up, do your best. I hope you bring your best. And now we move up. So if you're coming from a place of survival, that competition, you're now on your back foot. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking for someone else to bring their best, and in the arts, it might be challenging to see this as a compete, but I'd move it towards a collaborate. Like, be on your front foot. How can you collaborate? How can we use these times to be hungry and to make magic and think creatively? That's how we're going to continue to progress versus, oh no, this whole COVID thing. Oh no, I can't do anything. Well, guess what? We're all dealing with it. Right. So if you're a victim to this situation, well, unfortunately, it's a mindset issue because every single person is dealing with it. So it's actually not fair or unfair. It just is.
Amazing, man. And one of the things as a creator, what really sticks out for me and bringing that philosophy over is that there's so much to be gained when you surround yourself with amazing creators and you're not jealous or envious or intimidated by other people's successes or their great work. If someone makes an amazing YouTube channel and it outgrows yours, especially if it's a friend, you should bring that on. You should collaborate with them and see yourself the challenge to try to grow in that way. And again, while doing it for yourself, or if it's someone in other disciplines, cheer them on, but welcome the opportunity to work as hard as they can to sort of compete at a more philosophical level and celebrate that together. Man, I can go on and on about this. We're going to continue on Instagram, and again, you guys can get involved in the conversation there. Before we leave this platform, can you let everyone watching, where can they find more of your work and see more of your content?
So Instagram is where I put most of my personal content at Martin J. Reader. And then Off-Ball Athlete is something I'm investing more time into on the content side. So Off-Ball Athlete on Instagram. And that's a lot of it. Anybody, sport or not, can really benefit from the sayings and from the quotes and from the podcast that I'm sharing. A lot of performance individuals, but doing our best to make this a human thing, not a sport thing. And so the Off Ball podcast can be found on Apple Podcast or any platform for that matter, and that's just the Off Ball podcast. So those are probably the best places to find me right now. You referenced a YouTube channel. I put no effort into that. So for you YouTube creators out there who go and visit it and you're like, this guy's a total hack. Well, I am right now, but if you got suggestions, hit me up.
No, there's still some great stuff there. And listen, I listen to a ton of podcasts, and I try to listen in different genres than what my field is. And your podcast is one of those that I love listening to. And season 3 is out. You have a few episodes for season 3 already out, and it's something that can add value to just about any creator. And I'm saying that personally. So thank you so much, Martin. Listen, we're going to jump over to Instagram. We're going to continue the conversation there. For those of you watching here, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.